All right. I am joined by Siobhan Nolan, who covers the Philadelphia Flyers for the Hockey News and covers the NHL at large. Does a whole bunch of things. And one of the great things about having someone on for the first time is mispronouncing their name, which I'm sure I've done. I'm probably pretty sure I did it just now. But Siobhan, thank you for joining. And how are you doing?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was thinking like, wait, how have I not reached out yet? It's been almost half the season. I was like, yeah, Siobhan doing a lot of excellent work covering the Flyers, but we're not going to talk about the Flyers. I want to do, I guess it's like an Olympic preview of some sorts, where at this point everyone's dissected the rosters and said like, all right, this player's been snubbed, and this player should be on the team, or this player shouldn't be on the team, and all that's already been hashed out. Talking big picture things, I want to kind of take a step back. I'll start with a general question, which I'm sure it doesn't seem like an issue anymore, but it feels like it was. So it feels like everyone's just kind of ignoring it. At what point does ice become an issue?
That is like, it's crazy that that's such a prevalent thing, um, just in the sports world in general, because I'm also like a soccer fan and like with the World Cup happening in North America, like that's something that people talk about a lot. Um, I think it's something that unfortunately has to be in the backs of people's minds and you hope it doesn't cause any like, you know, real issues and cause any real problems. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the world that we're living in. You have to prepare accordingly. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't cause too many trouble or too many problems. But yeah, I think that's going to be kind of just like the lingering kind of shadow in the background of this whole thing.
It's something that I almost went to the back burner where it was the topic for a while. And then I guess when the rosters got announced and everyone's focused on that, it took a back seat, or
Yeah.
it feels like everyone's just continuing as it is.
Mm-hmm.
My thought on this is because now the more I think about it is hockey's been played on terrible ice before. We've had this experience in the past. You look at the Winter Classic was played in Florida, and people were talking about the ice leading up to the game and during the game itself, that it
Mm-hmm.
was bad quality ice. We've had Winter Classics before. We've had Lake Tahoe, which you can remember that. Now
Yeah.
it's 5 years ago, if you could believe that. Talk
Yeah.
about time flying. But they had to delay the games there. They've played on terrible ice before. They'll do it again. And this is my thought is if they have to delay a few games or postpone a few games, they'll
Mm-hmm.
stop action for a bit and
Yeah.
then they'll continue there. It seems like it's almost become like a it was an issue at one point and then it wasn't. And now it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that's kind of in the back of everyone's minds, but something that they're able to handle now that the more you think about it. That's just my thought on that one. I wonder if you have any follow ups to that or not.
Yeah, I remember seeing people took like close up pictures of the Winter Classic guys because they were trying to show off they had these cool like face off dot designs for it. It was like a snowflake and like sun because it was in Miami. But you saw it was like the ice was almost like scarred. Like it had like these a bunch of like raised marks on it, and you're like, how are they going to even be able to play on this? And I know everyone has been kind of freaking out about the fact that like the rink itself wasn't fully constructed yet, and that was a big thing. And then there was like the size of the rink too. So it feels like there's just so many like logistical things that are cropping up that, normally I guess for a Winter Olympics you wouldn't really think about, but now, all of these issues have become so prevalent across social media and everyone's like losing their minds over it. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage to pull it all together once February actually rolls around.
Yeah, that's like the arena part where if like if fans can't be, that's going to be just a
Yeah.
general mess thing. But they'll play through that. That's not the issue. It's the smaller rinks, which uh is something that's like kind of interesting. It's like a full circle thing where the NHL always dislikes the international rinks, which are bigger, and then they end up getting smaller rinks. And go figure, talking a lot about Italian ice, even though that's not the Italian ice that usually I talk about or
Yeah.
I tend to like, but I digress on that. I had that in the back of my head. I was like, I gotta
Mhm.
mention that. But who can
Of
have
course.
their TJ? Who could have their TJ Oshie moment?
Oh, that's interesting.
And I asked TJ Oshie because
Yeah.
everyone will like point to, all right, this star player is going to have a
Hmm.
great tournament. And what I think is fascinating about TJ Oshie is not many casual hockey fans knew who he was all
Hmm.
of a sudden he's the national name. Everyone comes away with the tournament. Where
Yeah.
you look at some players, there's obviously the star players like Matthew Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk, and you look at Canada, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and you look at the household names.
Yeah.
Who's a name that hockey fans know about? It's that's what I say TJ Oshie, where it's like hockey fans know they're good, but
Hmm.
not everyone knows. So who can be that player that has a great tournament? Everyone all of a sudden knows who they are.
Ooh. I mean, I think if the natural progression might be like Jack or Quinn Hughes. Like I know they're very big in the hockey world, but I was really surprised. I'm gonna get into like my pop culture bag for a second, but when all those rumors about Jack Hughes and Tate McRae came out and everyone was like, who the hell is Jack Hughes? I was like, how do you not know who Jack Hughes is? Like he's like the biggest deal in the NHL, and people outside of that apparently just had no idea who he was. So maybe like for the general public, that'll be another introduction to Jack Hughes. Um, I don't know, that's hard because there's so many stars on this team, like so many guys that we know and love. And I think a lot of different guys could really have a breakout tournament because the USA roster, especially, has the Austin Matthews and Charlie McAvoy's and everything. So I don't know. It's hard to pick just one, but I think that'll be another interesting storyline to follow for sure.
And it's interesting. It's hard to pick one, and it's interesting because like for us, you're recalibrating a bit because for us,
Exactly.
we know all these players. Like I
Yeah.
think what's the classic example during the Four Nations, everyone who followed hockey knew Jacob Slavin was great, and Jacob Slavin's great defensively. But even for hockey fans who like even hockey people who cover the game all the time, who watch it all the time, you don't see Jacob Slavin up close the way that he was at the Four Nations, the way he played. And then people are like, wow, no, this guy is the
Mhm.
best stay at home defenseman, or probably one of the best in the league. The one that if you had to make a Norris trophy, but take away the offensive skill, he would win it, the best stay at home defenseman, or he'd be one of those perennial winners of that award. And people finally saw on a big stage. Yeah, there's more there. Someone like Brock Faber also, who
Mhm.
actually could be a good option here for a player who people are starting to realize, no, there's more there than you notice. But for casual hockey fans, it's hard to know the players that they know. I guess they do know Jack Hughes because of
Yeah.
Tate McRae.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tate McRae. I
Mhm.
don't really know. I actually don't know who she is. So that was the other way
Wow.
around, where people are saying who's Jack Hughes. I'm like, who's she?
Exactly.
I don't know. Who she, uh,
Very-
I'll throw I'll throw two names though at you. Dylan Larkin.
Okay.
He's the player that he's always in the conversation of top 10 center, top 15 center. He's always on that fringe, the tier below the elite centers, but people are like, he's better than that. This is a
Mhm.
tournament where, and this is a year in general for him, where he can really burst on the scene where he has a big tournament, which he actually scored a goal in the Four Nations against Canada. So everyone likes to remember that moment.
Yeah.
But he could have a very good tournament. And also the Red Wings that people come back into follow hockey that they notice, oh yeah, the Red Wings are in a playoff spot. He could have be a big part of that. He's having a career year. I think he's up to 21 goals, so he's on pace
Yeah.
for 42 if my math is correct because they're around the halfway point.
Yeah.
Uh, he could have a big tournament. And I think also because the tournament's going to be faster, he's the type of player
Yeah.
that can play that fast game. One more name I'll throw out there. This is really just like a dark horse name is Tage Thompson, who was
I
not
was
on the
thinking that
team.
too.
And I'm like, he was not on the team last time. He was not on the
Yeah.
Four Nations team, but he's the type of player that I think, like Brady Kachuk, we
Mhm.
don't know how good he is on a big stage because he's never been on a big stage.
Yeah.
And you put him out there, and he's the type of player that has all the skills or checks all the boxes. He's a great skater for his size. He has that physicality, has that size, and he's got that shot where he could have a few big goals in a big game, and all of a sudden everyone's like, "Who's this? Who's Tage Thompson? Or who is this guy who's been in Buffalo for the past almost decade, but we don't know how good he is?" And then no, and everyone's gonna be like, "No, Tage Thompson's a top 10 center or top of the league forward."
Exactly.
You're I guess like just your thoughts on that. Maybe some players that came to mind as I mentioned those two. Those are two on the USA team, but I probably should have mentioned someone Canada because there's some
Yeah,
there
I
too.
mean, I'm definitely on the Tage Thompson train for that. Obviously, as people who cover hockey, we're aware of how good he can be, but especially like when you're on a team like Buffalo, that's maybe not in like the not one of the bigger teams, they've had their struggles recently. not even recently, as we know, they've had some kind of historic struggles, but he's kind of like that one guy where it's like, all right, if you have to like pick a favorite player on Buffalo, I think most people would probably say Tage Thompson. And then you have guys like Zach Werenski, on defense, who we know great defenseman, and he's really kind of made a name for himself recently. So he's definitely another one that I could see maybe having more of that breakout game in the Olympics.
It's a tendency I'm noticing now that whenever you get asked the question, you try to look at, all right, who's that third line? It's kind of like when we write preseason
Yeah,
articles for bold predictions or who's that underrated player on every team. You
yeah,
naturally go to the third line. You're like, all right, let
yeah,
me pick a third line center from each team or a third
exactly.
or a second pair defenseman. This is the natural way of doing it. It's interesting with these teams is one theme I've noticed when I looked at these rosters is that especially the US and Canada roster is a lot of them when selecting their teams ignored the skill and speed of a lot of players. They chose experience and physicality
Yes.
over skill. And I wonder which country could that cost the most. It's going to cost someone because I mean, naturally, I mean, someone's going to lose. Someone's got to lose.
Yeah.
But who can that end up costing? I feel I have my leaning towards who it's going to end up costing, but I wonder who you think like by the way they built their teams, where we're going with physicality, we're going with the experience and the reputation. Who do you think that could cost?
As much as I'm obviously rooting for the US, I think it could be a problem for them. I know that there were quite a few guys that people thought got stubbed for that roster. And obviously there's so many good American players now that it's got to be a hard task to pick and choose who you're going to put on that roster. But you know, a lot of these names are very familiar, and these are guys that we've seen a lot before. And I understand the thinking of putting, the tried and true guys, but I also think that there's a lot of young talent that they, could have taken a risk on, taken a chance on, and you know, I don't think that this roster is necessarily going to fail or do badly, but I think maybe leaning more towards that familiarity instead of embracing some new talent, especially with the way that Canada kind of, included like Backlund Celebrini and guys like that on their roster. Like they really embrace that younger generation. So I think the US might suffer a little bit because they've leaned on guys with experience, and you never know with injuries and stuff. Matthew Kachuk's just coming back from an injury. Jack Hughes is coming back from an injury. So it's like a little precarious in that situation. So unfortunately, I think the US might be the biggest name that could suffer from that, especially because people had very fiery opinions on who should have gotten chosen for that roster.
Yeah, I have the same sort of thought where I'm thinking the U.S. It's more of not just if you're going to face Canada, but that not just that they picked experience. It's also Bill Guerin picking the people he knows, and
Yes.
Mike Sullivan picking the people he knows. Even though uh, so like these, it's like oh yeah, I've coached these players, or I've had these players in whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I'm not running the risk of playing someone who is younger, or bring someone who I haven't seen much of to put on the team. And I think it's actually going to cost them. I'm not talking about Macklin Celebrini, who Canada took a chance on. It could cost the U.S. against a team, someone like Sweden, where Sweden actually is not just has Leo Carlson, who is very good at hockey. People actually,
Yes.
he's a player I probably should have said like who could have their TJ Oshie moment, except
Oh,
for in
for sure.
Sweden, he's like the icon. He's the iconic player now. He's like their go-to face of face of the franchise nation. I don't know,
Yeah.
but he's but they have him. They took a chance on him. Not just they took a chance. He's their top line center now.
Yeah.
So you can run into a team where it's like Sweden or even Germany to a point where they can make it a 5-4 game, and you don't have that skill that goes head to head against them. And it is
Yeah.
interesting because there are it's something that's interesting about this tournament is that there are all these nations that have the skill, I guess, to go head to head and may in a high scoring game you don't feel as good. I guess it does help explain why some of these teams are why US Canada are saying, all right, we are going to bring in that physicality because we have that and the other nations don't. And I guess that's a historical sort of thought where
Yeah.
these teams, the US and Canada have always said, all right, we can play a physical game, we can rattle teams. I'm getting nostalgic here with Canada, where when they faced Russia, it was always, all right, well, we have the physicality. We can
Mhm.
rattle the other nations, and that's something that I guess they have in their back pocket. So maybe it
Yeah.
is the thing that they wanted to lean into just
Yeah.
to have that edge. I guess I'm
Mhm.
rambling off on that, but your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I understand why you would choose that physicality, especially because the US does have a lot of those guys that fit that mold, and you have guys who aren't afraid to cause chaos. And even if it's not necessarily a physical thing, they have guys like the Kachucks and all that who are notorious for getting under opponents' skin. So even if they're not like hitting hard against the boards, they do have that I guess pest edge, if you want to call it something like that. So I understand it, but it comes to a point where again you have to start embracing that skill and embracing that technicality and creativity, because that's what the NHL is starting to look like now. That is what the focus for a lot of these young players is. So you can only take it so far, leaning back into the physicality and the sheer size factor before you kind of catch up with the times and be like, okay, these kids are focusing on the skills and they're focusing on the tricks and everything. Like I harken back a lot now, especially to Trevor Zegras, Flyers bias a little bit, but he's a guy that people kind of discounted because of he was, I guess, what they called like an Instagram hockey player. Like he was doing all the highlight reel tricks and stuff in the
Or the
Michigan and
joke is
all
pond hockey, where him and Bedard,
that.
where it's a lot of skill but not a lot of like
Yes.
technicality.
Yeah, and a lot of people discounted Trevor Zegers because of that, but you see now on the Flyers, it's really working to his advantage, and he's made a lot of little adjustments to his game, so it's not just the flashiness, but that's kind of the direction that the NHL as a whole is really headed, and yeah, I think the U.S. it would serve them well to maybe start embracing that in further international competitions.
And it seems like also not just US and Canada that there is this belief of this is how we built the four nations, so we
Yeah,
should do it again. And the
yeah,
four nations under NHL rules. Although the more I think about it, I think the more, not that they had the intel as much as they had the belief that it's going to be like an NHL game just in the Olympics, where the refs are going to be NHL refs, where or the majority of them are based on the reports, and the rink is smaller, so
yeah.
it's not not a speed game per se, or they
Mhm.
have that sort of thought where okay, we can play this way. And I think the officiating is going to be interesting, where they're
Yes.
probably going to try to ref international style rules, except for the difference is the penalties aren't going to be called. There's going to be a lot of penalties they let go, and that's a big, I think, difference between Europe and here, is that in Europe they'll call a lot more things, and here they'll let things go because you need to have a flow to a game. You need to have like or else if you call everything like this game stopping way too much and
Yeah.
be way too long. Is this is something interesting? Is the U.S. winning the gold like the ideal for growing the game? Because I have a hot take on this.
Ooh, I want to say yes because, the US hasn't won gold, I think, since 1980,
Yeah,
right?
1980.
Yeah, and that was the big miracle on ice game. And obviously this is very much not like that circumstance, but you know, they do want to grow the game, and everyone loves a gold medal. Everyone loves the shiny gold medal, and everyone loves the narrative of the US dominating at the Olympics in general. So I want to say yes, but I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Because yeah, this is interesting. Is that everyone's talking about the ideal for growing the game, especially in the U.S., is U.S.
Yeah.
winning gold. I think you look back to 1980, where hockey was a league, but not really starting to expand. But
Hmm.
it wasn't. It was very regionally based, and
Yeah.
until 1980, in terms of significance, it's winning gold was a big thing for in the US. US hockey really grew then.
Yeah.
And even though it wasn't best on best, it was a bunch of underage kids. I think the stat
Yeah.
was that the average age of the US team could not drink legally. They were below the age of 21, which
Yeah.
is a fun stat to throw out there, a fun fact to throw out there.
Of course.
My hot take is that that is not the ideal is for as much as US winning gold is for Sweden or Finland to win it all,
Okay.
or Czechia. or Germany go on a run. And my thought on this is I feel like we don't look back at 2006 as significant enough because Sweden played Finland in the final.
Mhm.
When these global teams, and we saw it at the World Juniors where Canada
Yeah.
and the US both lost, is
Yeah.
when these global teams pull off upsets and when they go on runs, the
Mhm.
impact that has is more significant generationally and just for the nation than it
Yeah.
is for whatever for what US can do. And I think US, if US wins gold, that is huge, is going to be big for the
Yeah.
hockey in the United States, is going to be a big moment for marketing the game here and really catapult hockey in the NHL in the US as one of the four major sports. It could put it
Mhm.
really on the map against the other big sports. It could really grow the game on a national level. From a global perspective, some of these nations pulling off upsets or going on runs, I think, is more significant. And I mean, for you look back at 2006, what that did, where Nicholas Lidstrom winning a gold there and Henrik Lundqvist winning a gold, that
Yeah.
brings in a generation of really Lidstrom brought in a generation of defensemen. You look at
Mhm.
Eric Carlson, Victor Hedman, all those defensemen who are actually
Yeah.
still on their team. So
Yes.
they're older now, but
Yeah.
that that made that impact.
Mhm.
And I think that's why I would say that's more impactful. I mean, you go back historically,
Mhm.
the Summit Series in 1972 did
Mhm.
more to grow the game because the thought was that Canada's king at hockey, Canada's the best, and Canada can never lose.
Yeah.
And they had a fight against the Russians. The Russians gave them all they could handle. Canada won, but it was not easy, and it proved that hockey is an international game, and
Mhm.
that there are other teams. I'm going off on a rant here, or rambling here, but that's where my thought is that the ideal for hockey to grow the game is for one of these teams to go on a run.
No, and I do see where you're coming from, and I do agree with that because we get so tunnel visioned because the NHL is largely based in the US and so many of its best players are, American now. But the Olympics is obviously a global thing. And a lot of eyes are on the Olympics that are not, American players. So I do think from a global perspective, absolutely. And everyone loves a bit of an underdog story. I mean, not that Sweden or Finland or anyone are necessarily underdogs because they're stacked with talent as well, but obviously US and Canada are very dominant in the hockey culture. So I do agree with that take that from an international perspective, which is what these Olympics are, it's not confined to just four nations or anything like that. It will be interesting to see how it grows internationally and how that international talent maybe can make it to the NHL one day and how that transforms the game that way. I think that's a
And it's
really interesting
and
take.
it's not just everyone talks about Finland, Sweden, but it's not just that they're, oh yeah, it's pulling an upset, a Cinderella story. They
Mhm.
have the talent now. I mean,
Yeah.
Finland and Sweden, everyone knows about their rosters and the talent they
Mhm.
have. But you even look at a team, you even look like at Czechia, where
Yeah.
in their goaltending unit, if I'm not mistaken, is Lucas Dostal, Jakub Dobeš, and Dan Vladar. So
Yeah.
they might have a tough decision on their hands with that in
Oh, for
mind.
sure.
But there, it would not. You look at just goaltending alone, where if they have one of
Mhm.
those goaltenders in net and they can pull off an upset against
Yeah.
some of these nations, and it wouldn't be surprise like this idea that it's a shock that this nation beats Canada or the US.
Mhm.
It's not like that anymore. I mean, you see the World Juniors when these
Yeah.
nations are have caught not caught up as much as they have the talent, and you could see it at the Olympics too. You look at Germany, for example, where it's Leon Draisaitl, Marit
Mhm.
Seider, Tim Stützle. I mean, goaltending's still a question for them. It's Philip
Yeah.
Grubauer as their starter, so wouldn't feel
Yeah.
good about that. But yeah,
Mhm.
they have caught not they have caught up. They have the talent to pull off of these upsets, and I think that does more to grow the game. So that's just like it is interesting that people for years have been like, oh yeah, no, it's easy to cruise through them, but that they have the talent is interesting to think about.
Yeah, and I think World Juniors this year especially is an interesting lens to look at this from because again, Flyers bias coming in here, but Porter Martone, Canada's captain for World Juniors, he was catching a lot of heat because of his, celebrations and kind of shenanigans and not to say that it reflects Canada as a whole. But I think it's an interesting way to look at it. Like these guys have the confidence, they know, okay, we're Canada or the US or wherever, we have this stacked team. And so we can kind of carry ourselves a certain way. And you saw that with the US team last year. They had the free bird goal song that everyone loved and hopped onto, and everyone was kind of hating on them for the way that they were celebrating and the way that they were approaching these games. But then this year you have Czechia going on this insane run, and they're making that gold medal push. And I think that's an interesting reflection of, okay, the tides might be changing in terms of, you have these guys that are willing to showboat and take that historic excellence and really put it on display. And then they kind of get upset by these teams that maybe people aren't paying as much attention to. Then they're going on these gold medal runs, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe we gotta tone it down a little bit because there's real competition here.
Well, I think the other part is that they lost. No one would pay attention to it if they were winning. Like I think
Yeah.
that's what's interesting about if US wins and you see like Matthew Kachuk and Brady Kachuk like doing like kind of like Ovechkin drinking beer out of the cup, where they
Yeah.
do some equivalent of that.
Something
No,
crazy like that.
no one's gonna care if they win. Obviously, I think that's what's interesting about the Fort Martone thing is that they didn't win yet, and there was
Yeah.
this idea of this arrogant, this overconfidence in the
Mm-hmm.
tournament, and then they do that. I actually want to throw another hot take at you. I feel
Okay.
like I'm not asking you too many. I'm not asking questions as much as I'm throwing these like takes out there.
But I like that. Yeah.
Is yeah, and yeah, I'm realizing like I should have done it differently. But this is another one that I'll throw is that everyone's talking about U.S. trying to beat Canada, or has to beat Canada, and I think
Yeah.
obviously that's another part to growing the game. And
Mm-hmm.
I think part of this rival, and everyone's saying it's not a rivalry if it's one sided.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of this sort of rivalry as similar to, and I mean I follow baseball, Yankees and
Yes.
Boston, like those that rivalry for years, as long as one side had the other number, it made it that type of rivalry. And I
Yeah.
wonder about that, where if US plays Canada and US loses to Canada again, where
Mm-hmm.
that kind of does keep this rivalry bigger to the point where if US beats Canada and then wins the gold, does it
Mm-hmm.
lose its luster or not? I don't. It's interesting because I'm going back and forth where if US can win gold and beat Canada in the process, where it is this changing the guard and it does bring a lot of attention to the next international stage, whatever it is. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, this one sidedness, a part of me thinks like that keeps this rivalry as it has this tension or has um this sort of underdog versus favorite feel, and it does bring that tension to it.
Yeah. The US Canada rivalry is a really interesting thing to look at because for so long Canada was like king of hockey, and the US does well when they have that narrative of the little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and we're coming in to prove ourselves and prove that even if people think it's a one-sided rivalry in Canada's favor, we can come in and throw them around a little bit. So yeah, this will be really interesting to see what it does for that rivalry, because if they do get that gold and they do beat Canada, like that's gonna the US narrative will definitely, not to call it propaganda, I feel like that's a strong word, but it will definitely be touted as like, oh, we're the new big boys in town, and we're the new kings of hockey, and now Canada has to take a back seat. So yeah, that'll be an interesting storyline to watch as well. I didn't even think of that.
And what's interesting about it as well is I think the you look at the four nations at how as a template where US beat Canada, and there's this belief of no, they're good enough to win this tournament and they're good enough to win gold. And I just keep thinking back to what this sort of tournament is when with four nations the same thing, where heading into that final game, it was like US is good. The US can win, they can win this tournament and they can win it all.
Yeah.
But when Canada needs to win, when they need a big goal, their stars find a way to get it done. Their stars find a way to do it. And it's that sort of belief, I think. It's sort of like on a big stage, when Canada needs their stars to deliver, they'll find a way to deliver. And it's kind of the interesting dynamics where it's interesting when they lose in the preliminary stage, there is that doubt, there is that panic or whatever you
Mhm.
want to call it that's there. But when it matters most, their stars can get it done. I feel like
Yeah.
to wrap up, we're actually notice now we're running a little lower on time. Any predictions? You can even go bold prediction or my lukewarm prediction. The way I always look at predictions for the Olympics is, or any predictions, you want to go chalk, and then you're like, you know what? I'm going to mix that up with my third pick, and then pick a wild card. That's kind of actually what I wrote down. But I wonder what you're thinking in terms of medals or whatever it is.
I definitely think Canada will get a medal. I mean, just looking at their roster on paper, it's like you imagine they have to get something. I guess my hottest take would be I wouldn't be surprised if the US didn't medal, honestly. I think that there could be some missteps. I think there could be some surprises for them. So it wouldn't shock me to my core if they maybe placed like fourth or something, like maybe just outside or maybe like got bronze. Like I don't think that the US is necessarily going to dominate. I think that they are going to have a lot of fights that they're going to have to push through. I think Sweden is definitely one to watch. I'm definitely going to keep my eye on them. So yeah, I think my hottest take would be the U.S. is not guaranteed a medal. I mean, no one is, but I think they are going to have to put up more of a fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe like got bronze or even finished outside of medal contention.
What is interesting is that you're mentioning some of these other nations, and I think about someone like Finland, like where they're just going to have matchup problems for teams for
Yeah,
people like the U.S., where you have Anton Lundell, even without Barkov in the middle, they have Anton Lundell as a two-way
yeah.
center. They have those players. They have Miko Rantanen on the wing, just matchup problems. My predictions, I'm pretty much going chalk, where it's U.S. and Canada are
Mhm.
going to get medals. Where gold and silver. I think Canada gets gold. I don't know the
Yeah,
bracket where U.S. could play Canada. I don't know. It's
yeah.
a little confusing
They'll
in that
find a way to
regard.
make that happen.
Yeah, we'll find a way where they play each other for gold, and
Exactly.
then it's like when it matters most, they'll find. I mean, yeah, it's like one of those frustrating things where I would want to say like my hot take would be that Dylan Larkin scores a big goal and becomes Captain America, similar like Zach Parise scored in the 2010 Olympics, and
Yeah.
to tie that game forced
Mhm.
to overtime, and he got a lot of praise after that. But my hot take, if there is, this is just like the picking a bold team, then they go far, is Czechia gets bronze,
Okay.
a full circle moment where back in the day it was Dominik Hasek who was the goaltender who stood on his head, but this time around, whether it's Lucas Dostal or Dan Vladar, actually don't. It's crazy we don't know who their starter is, or we
Yeah.
don't have a as clear a picture. We know Canada's going to go with Bennington to start, but we still don't know there. Maybe there are people who actually have a little intel on that. Just I
Yeah.
don't know. That's what I'm basing it off
Couldn't
of.
tell you.
But that's my bold prediction. My bold prediction of the group there. But yeah, that's all we got. We actually got a full episode out of this.
Yeah.
So Shavana, it was pleasure having you on. I don't know if I pronounced your name right. I'm probably getting it wrong this whole time. But
No, you have been pronouncing it
oh,
correctly.
I
Very
took a
impressed. Yeah.
took a little victory lap on that. But any plugs, anything you're working on? I feel like it's always a busy time in
Mhm.
Flyers country. For all I know, there's going to be some crazy trade or something happens between the Olympics. But anything you're working on, plug away.
Yeah, I'm mostly active with hockey on my Twitter X, whatever we're calling it. My username is SG Nolan, Nolan. I'm not going to make people try and spell my first name. I know better. But yeah, that's where, I post a lot of my articles, for the hockey news. If you want to visit the hockey news flyer site, that's where all of my stuff is. But yeah, that's where most of my hockey stuff lives, and that's where I'm trying to be more active. I always toggle between like, I want to get off my phone, I want to have less screen time, but then I'm like, wait, it's literally part of my job that I have to be like on social media. So yeah, that's where you can find all of my little things that I do. I do try to do some like video stuff as well. But yeah, just all my articles and stuff are there on Twitter.
That's always the Twitter thing where I think people have their extremes where they come in waves where it's like there's like one day where you're tweeting like 1,000 times in a day, and then it's like
Exactly.
you go like a few days without tweeting anything. You're like, wait, should I have
Mhm.
tweeted something? I feel like I
No,
did something. It's like
seriously.
no, just nothing happened. There's also
Yeah.
like on Twitter, which I always call Twitter because
Yeah.
it's always Twitter for me.
Mhm.
is that everyone just again eventually everyone on hockey Twitter eventually just degenerates into Aaron Portzline or uh Stan Fischler slash Jim Matheson when it comes to their tweets. Just the way they tweet about things, where it's
Yeah.
like uh Aaron Portzline, it's like goal, he'll tweet out 1-0 CBJ, and that's
Hmm.
it. He covers the
And
Blue Jackets.
yeah. Um,
But
and I know for me, like with my tweets, sometimes I'll have this random one that gets like tens of thousands of views, and it's like this is the most like innocuous, like one-off tweet. Like it's always interesting to see how it varies because I remember I tweeted a video from practice. It was a very optional practice, and Nikita Grabankin was just doing like somersaults on the ice. Couldn't tell you why, but I was like, okay, that's funny. I'll tweet that out, and that got almost like 100,000 views or something like that, something like 80,000. I'm like, why did this pop off like that? But
yeah,
that's the nature of Twitter, I suppose.
that was something also where I had one of those and I was like, I can't believe this stupid tweet got so many
Exactly.
so
Those
many
are stupid
likes.
ones,
But
yeah.
yeah, it's a pleasure having you on. Definitely in the will reach out in the future. I can't believe it took me half a season to realize. Oh wait, Siobhan Nolan's around on in
Better
the
late than
hockey.
never.
But yeah, pleasure having you on. We'll talk soon.
Very awesome. Thanks for having me.